A really, really common trend right now on social media is talking about narcissism or talking about personality disorders or sociopaths. This is like a really, really big thing, right? And the reason why this happens is because oftentimes when relationships end, people do something called a discard. You guys ever heard of something called a discard? That's where, you've been in a relationship with somebody and you have like months or years of incredible moments together, right? And that could be like big moments. You went to some giant ski hill, or you went, to some beautiful park that you went to, or you went on a beautiful trip. But it's also hundreds of little small moments, right? Going to the mall, going shopping for socks, going to, frozen yogurt, going to simple restaurants, going to 7-Eleven, conversations that you had, little conflicts that you went through where they supported you. Your uncle had a new kid and you went and saw the baby, and there's all these different moments. And some people in a breakup, unfortunately, it's so painful for them, they have to withdraw from it, and they do something called a discard, or they do something called, they'll ghost you. Who's ever had it where somebody like just totally discarded you or ghosted you? Put your hands up if that's ever happened to you. Okay, how did that feel when somebody who you had that many experiences with just pretends you don't exist anymore? It's like none of that even happened and you're just trash. How did that feel when that happened?
You feel left out all of a sudden. What did I do?
Yeah, because a breakup's a breakup, or an end of a friendship or end of a business relationship. That's fair enough. Like things end, that's normal. But it's like how did that feel for you guys? How would you describe it?
Yeah, you felt like.
Yeah. Why did it make you feel that way?
Well, because you have this like conflict with yourself. You're like, oh, I'm not loved. Like they don't accept me for who I am.
Yeah, but even now, remember the relationship's done, so it's not like they need to love you the way they did before.
Right.
But it's like, have you ever had someone just straight cut it, like just ghost you, like just straight you don't exist?
It was complicated. I'm not the right person for it. It was like there's some like things that like tied into that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Were they like sending you a lot of insults or like angry?
No. It was fine. We were like friends. We like were dating. We broke up, and then all of a sudden he just like blocked me after that. But it was weird.
Yeah.
We were still friends after that. But then we ended up seeing each other like probably like a few months after he ghosted me. He was like, oh, I just had to focus on myself. I put a lot of attention.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so how did it feel in that period in between when he just cuts you off like that?
I knew like that it was best for me, honestly.
Okay.
I knew that it was best for
Okay,
both of us.
so I think that's actually better than what a lot of people get, but a lot of people get straight discarded. Does anyone have a comment on discarding? Yeah.
I actually did that. And,
Yes.
In a prior relationship when I thought it was the right thing to do, and then I regretted not handling it better later.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I could see that. Yep. And well, that's what I was going to get into. Anybody else? Yep.
It kind of makes you feel like, was it even real?
Yeah, was it even real is the common one.
Was it even real for them?
Yeah, like was I just talking to this human, like this human body that's just like this animated corpse that's just purely just run by its DNA, no soul whatsoever, just literally purely transactional, trying to get what it wants, nothing else, right?
All those memories fake?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Then I lied the whole time. It was all lie.
All lie.
She meant it. Also be heartbroken too.
Sure, yeah, but see, I feel like something like heartbreak is normal, but then when somebody takes it to the next level, and it's just like you're dead to me, like that kind of thing, right? And so the thing is that this will happen a lot. It's a common thing where some people just don't do well at the end of relationships, and so what happens is that they can't handle it. And basically they do this thing called splitting, where they either idealize or they demonize, and they're just unable to actually see things in a balanced manner. So then what happens is that they start looking for answers. And so you'll look at and so this is where the narcissism trend is really popular on social media. You guys seen this? Like escaping narcissism, it's massive on social media, right? Narcissists, right? Now, the idea of narcissism is that basically people are just like an emotional, like basically they have what's called a personality disorder. And so narcissism is a very real thing. I know real narcissists, it's very real. But what starts happening on social media is people think everybody's a narcissist. Everybody's a narcissist now. Everybody's a psycho. Everybody's a sociopath. Everybody's a narcissist, et cetera, et cetera. And so what winds up happening is that people have an end of a relationship and they're like, well, that was a narcissist or that was a sociopath or whatever, but they never do any self-examination. The easiest way to let yourself off the hook is to just say, oh, that person is evil and do no self-examination whatsoever. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, platforms like Instagram are driven off of immediate gratification. So something like, oh, this person is a narcissist or things like that, that is one of the easiest ways to emotionally pacify yourself if you're feeling bad, right? Something like, maybe it's you. Hey, maybe it's you. That's a much, much harder message to absorb. And somebody has to be in a very expansive state and a thriving state to be able to take that kind of feedback. So basically what you have, if you want to understand this at a core level, is most of society, and you should look at yourself like this, is in a contracted state. They're in a contracted mental state. And so what that means is that something like real critical feedback is perceived as an insult and is perceived as devaluation. Okay? It's perceived as an insult and devaluation. People in a coping state hate critical feedback because they're struggling with self-esteem, they're struggling with self-love, and so what happens is that if you give any kind of critical feedback, it just kicks them down further. Any kind of critical feedback, they're not really able to hear it. They're not able to let it land or internalize. It's too painful. What it does is it lowers their dopamine in the brain, and it crashes their dopamine, so they can't even think straight. So you give some good critical feedback, and you basically just ruin their whole day. They can't absorb any of it. They can't do anything with any of it. It's just a complete waste of their time. So once you're in a thriving state, you see critical feedback very, very differently, right? So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with ultra-wealthy people. It's something I got into during COVID. And these are guys that are making so much money, and they literally will pay you crazy amounts of money to rip them to shreds. And if you do a phone call with them and you don't rip them to shreds, they're angry. They're like, dude, like, I didn't pay you this. And more importantly for them is their time. More important than the money is their time. They're like, I didn't give an hour of my day that I could use productively to make XYZ amount of money, which is a lot more than even the coaching costs. I didn't do that to have you tell me that I'm a good person. I don't need that from you. I already think I'm a good person. I'm already successful. What I want is to know how to get it to the next level. So imagine if you knew that if you had critical feedback, that all of a sudden you could use that to triple your income. Would you want critical feedback? Imagine you knew that you could use it to triple your social results. Would you want critical feedback? Yes. But the problem is the average person can't handle that. There was a TikTok video that I did last year that went mega viral. And what happened was I had a student and I was ripping him to shreds. And he went on to get an Instagram model girlfriend. And he's just like this little small shy guy. But he went on to do that. And he's completely crushing it. Now, he's still got a ways to go on his journey like everybody. It's not like it's just all magically solved. But he was actually a young person who's very small and shy who literally said, I want critical feedback. And he went and he got critical feedback, and it actually changed his life. But the average person sees that, and they don't even have a context for why that would even be a good thing. And what we're seeing now are platforms like TikTok that are completely coping-based platforms, almost 99%. Like most of the messaging on TikTok, because the messaging is so incredibly short and unnuanced, it's basically, you're awesome. Look, message number one, you are awesome. Like that, there's like entire memes on TikTok. It's like, listen, you are too good to ever not have someone value you. You've got to learn to love yourself, right? And it's like these frantic bemoanings. And what is the mindset and behavior of the average person who's investing time into TikTok, which like you can learn almost nothing in content that short. I mean, think about this speech right here and any individual 15 seconds out of it. That's basically what you're getting there, okay? But you can learn a couple little tips and stuff. I mean, I guess, right? But you know my point. It's not the same thing as long form. Okay, it's just totally different thing, right? But TikTok on its face is a platform where you have no attention span. So people with a low attention span are already going there. They can't handle looking at anything long form. They get too tired to look at it. They're not even at a stability enough in their dopamine that they could even look at long form content. Then from there, they can't even look at content that is actually how to improve yourself or anything like that. Okay? So what winds up happening is that it's a lot of cope. TikTok is like this, is massive, massive coping. And so then what happens, which I also don't like, and I've even seen myself fall prey to this, is I feel like a lot of the relationship-based TikToks is always talking about what you're not getting and how you have to put a boundary on. And I've even seen myself get caught up in that where, let's say that I'm taking someone on a beautiful trip and I paid to be honest, $20,000 or $30,000 to go on that trip, and then say that they're acting up and they're kind of emotionally dysregulated and so on and so forth, and then maybe I'm flipping through Instagram and it's like, if someone can't respect you and the value that you're bringing, get rid of them. Meet someone else, right? And I'll see that, and to be honest, there's kind of something there if I'm being real. You kind of start to forget, that person's your friend. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're looking at this person through some kind of an Instagram meme, and it's like, that's your friend. Now, they may be acting up or whatever, but that's your friend. Like, that should really be the very first thing in that meme, is like, hey, this person is kind of in some ways your best friend, and they're having a hard time. And maybe you should like figure out why they're having a hard time and look at your approach to helping them. Ultimately, people are responsible for themselves, but at least seeing what it is that you can do. But when you already have in that little Instagram meme that reactive and combative energy of like you're gonna cut them off, and that starts to infect your brain, you're already not viewing them as your friend. But notice how that doesn't spread in social media. Like, hey, you know that person you have an argument with? Remember, they're your friend. That's not a spreadable message as like, you gotta know your worth. You gotta love yourself. You gotta put up a boundary. You know, so you seem like you have something passionate you want to say here.
Yeah. So I actually made the same connection this year. I thought people like hated me or mad at me. I'm embarrassed to like admit this. I called them, they're fucking friend. And this is something I never experienced until this year. And I made
because there's a lot. He's basically just saying that if you guys couldn't hear that, he's saying that there's a lot of he realized a lot of people he had reactive energy around were his friends, and that we can literally forget that. Because remember, apps like TikTok, apps like Instagram put us in this very combative frame of like, you gotta know your worth, you gotta love yourself, don't let them do this to you, or get rid of them. And it puts that in your brain, and it hypnotizes you away from realizing that people are actually your friends. And then what happens is that then once you cut that off, then you get what's called an RAS flip, where an RAS flip is basically like your selective focus, what you focus on, what you block out. And so what happens is that there could be the whole page of all this awesome stuff, but a couple little dots of bad stuff. But then when you get rid of the person, it's too painful, or they get rid of you, it's too painful, and then you zero in on the bad stuff. And then it loops in your mind. It just loops and loops and loops in your mind because your brain is trying to like delete them and trying to reframe them as evil because it's too painful what happened. So can you see the kind of pattern here that we see in human relationships where you're looking at a coping-based platform like Instagram, or like TikTok or Instagram, and Instagram, by the way, is now trying to become TikTok, in case you guys didn't notice that. Pictures are demoted, Reels is the big thing. So you have a coping-based platform. The coping-based platform, the act of watching it itself lowers your attention span right off the bat. So now what's happening is your attention span is lower, which then puts you in a coping state. So even if you weren't coping before, you start using that platform, you're gonna be coping now, right? Isn't that funny? Then, now from there then what's gonna happen is then the messaging, because what's pumped to the top is very you against the world. It's you against them. It's have your boundaries, love yourself, and it's not gonna be this person's your friend, and maybe look at yourself. They're not gonna put that on it, okay? And so let me talk about some of the things that you could look at in yourself. Let me give a couple examples of that, okay? So if you look at me, I've been running a pretty involving business, shall we say, for a number of years, okay? So if you could imagine, you guys know me as a public speaker or somebody that does videos, but that gets old pretty quick when you're just around me all the time. That's not who I actually am. You know, like you see like Tony Robbins or Eckhart Tolle or somebody like that, right? You know, it's one thing to be learning from Tony Robbins at Date with Destiny, and you're jumping up and down and running over a fire thing. Well, that'd be UPW, but you know my point, right? And then it's another thing when you live with a guy, okay? So what do you think it would be like that stuff gets old pretty quick. What would you guess are some of my annoying tendencies? I'm gonna put it on myself right now. What would you guys guess about me, or would be some of my annoying tendencies if you live with me?
You're long-winded.
Yeah, super long-winded, super ranty. Like I literally just get up midday, like mid-rant. I'm like just sitting here like eating dinner, and I'm just like, you know what? Blah 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 blah. You know, right? Like I do that. You know, right? Like, the person could like leave, go to the bathroom, and I just be like yelling at the wall. You know, right? They come back. It's like talking at them, right? So you see how when you're at an event, you're wanting to learn something. You have limited access to me, so that's fun. What about if you're around me all the time? Well, that could get very, very annoying. What are some other things? If you had to guess somebody who's running a very involved business, what are some other things that would be annoying? Say I'm going to look at myself. What would be some other things that would be annoying? It's really simple stuff. It's all obvious. It's like cliched and obvious. What would it be?
Love you, Owen.
Yeah.
Time management, man. Time management.
Yeah, when you're just hammered with spitting plates all the time, and you've got your phone's blowing up and everybody's in an emergency, and then what happens is that now your significant other, you're probably devaluing their priorities, right? And in my mind, I'm like, well, you're benefiting from our lifestyle, so why don't you shut up? But then at the same time, that does wear thin, right? No, because it is true, right? Like, you're living an amazing lifestyle. So in your mind, you're like, well, you're benefiting from this too. In fact, you don't even work, so you're benefiting from this all day long. I work 95% of the time, and I get 5% of this. So that feels real to me. But the problem is that when you're living in it, it becomes normalized at a certain point, and you just want attention. It's usually after you break up, and then after they go back to regular life, and then they miss it, but in the moment they can't appreciate it, and it's real to them at the time. What are some other things would you say? What are some things that would be, I'm trying to show you how I would dissect my own behavior. I'm trying to lead in by example. Yeah. Oh yeah, so if you look at my nervous system, hey, like I'm just always ready to go. Yeah, always ready to go.
I would say micromanaging. I feel like you can just point out in detail if somebody's like the posture is wrong or.
Yes, yeah. Basically, okay. Here's what I'd put it. What you learn in business, like your team will mess up everything that you don't give every little detail and repeat it on a loop. Like put it on the other channel. The other channel. Could you repeat that?
Put it in the
Okay, text me and write that down. Put that in an alarm. And the problem is if you don't do that, like you lose a lot of money. Like you wake up with like the wrong things and it really, really, really messes you up. So that's a problem. And when you're around somebody like that all the time, it gets really, really old. But it's also hard for me because when I don't do it, they mess up. But that can get old too. Okay, what are some other things that would be annoying about, being in a relationship with someone like me? What would it, give some examples. I try to say my voice in between events, but sometimes I do vocal rest, which could be pretty annoying. Yeah, what else?
Unsolicited advice, maybe.
Oh yeah, super amounts of unsolicited advice. It is so painful for me to sit there watching somebody messing up. And also because I'm paid to have the correct answers, and then I'm having a conversation with somebody who I know what they're saying is wrong, and I'm just like, yes, oh yes, honey. That's brilliant. And my teeth are just like, like I can't, right? And in supporting them and building their confidence, yeah, it's incredibly painful for me. Yeah, what else? What would be some other things?
Overthinker.
Yeah, I definitely, super broad analysis of almost everything that I do. Yeah, I'd say that's one. What else? Just take a guess.
Not letting people lie to themselves.
Yeah, not letting people have convenient self-deception. Yeah, and these are all things that I've had to train myself on and look at in great detail. And a really, really big one is also holding people to high standards, right? Like my view, if I'm being honest, is that the way that things should work is that I should hold myself to high standards and everybody else should hold themselves to high standards. And if you do that, you get very, very successful. Because I get bored with the same old thing. I can't stand it. Like my life in Los Angeles is I live in the Hollywood Hills, super fat crib, full-on gym in the crib, giant movie theater in the crib, access to the best parties, doing the best parties, know where all the best restaurants are, all the best shopping, own a couple $1 million in clothing, I know friggin' everybody, I can get in everywhere. I live a life in LA that most people would dream of. I hate it. It's just the same thing. It's just Groundhog Day. So most people, what they're doing is they're fighting to get in that reality. Like they're fighting to build that for themselves. But for me, I've had that for long enough that I can't, what's happened to my brain now is I can't distinguish the days. Okay, if I go to a 5-star restaurant, have someone very attractive in my life that I'm messing around with, had great friends over, went to an amazing party, that becomes a blur for me. It's just the exact same thing. So what kind of things do you guys think entertain me at this point? Nature, travel, doing new things, challenging myself, doing things that I have no idea how to do, things that are completely new, things that, But the thing is the average person function well like that? No, they hate it. It sounds great on paper. They hate it. And they hate it because I won't sit there looking at Netflix while also doing that. I just won't. Because I get nothing out of it. It's like a dead time in my life. It's like I'm dying. That's how I feel. It's like I'm dying when I'm doing that, okay? Why do I almost do the never do the same speech twice? It's like I'm dying. Okay, yeah.
reached the peak of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and now you're just seeking spiritual enlightenment. That's like the next level.
I wouldn't, like, you're putting me in a very flattering light, like I'm also kind of a tool, but yes, I have reached the peak of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and now enlightenment, right? Yeah, but the thing is like, but while that would be a very over-flattering thing that would be wiping away all of my neurotic and annoying tendencies, there's sort of like that, which I think any of us in this room can get to if you just grind it out. So yeah, so for me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, regular things do 0 for me. It sensorially feels good. Like I'm like, oh, this is a good feeling. Right? Like say that you're, messing around with somebody, right? And they're very attractive. Oh, it feels good. Oh, I'm eating a 5-star dinner. It feels good. Okay, that's good. But you have to understand something. To get to a certain point of success, and again, I've got a long way to go, but to get to a certain point of success, you probably have to some degree, whether you consciously understand it or not, like you might not even consciously understand this, have to get to the point of what some people call non-dual awareness. What that basically means is that you're just happy no matter what. So what starts to happen is that to get to a certain point of success, it's so difficult and frustrating and annoying that the only way that you can get there is if you train your mind to be happy no matter what. So in my brain, because I'm trained to be happy no matter what, when I just feel a sensorial feeling, I don't get a lot out of that. Because I'm already trained to be at peace no matter what. Right? So even for me to make more money doesn't do anything for me because I'm happy no matter what. It doesn't have any value for me. Okay, so what do you think has value for me then?
Helping other people.
I'd say adding value and being in for me, it's about deeper and deeper flow states. Deeper flow states. It's about deep evolution internally, like greater internal depth. And it's about expanding my abilities past what I knew was possible. And it's also about having experiences that I've never had that are brand new and that connect me even more to those flow states. So imagine being somebody like that, managing a business and then in a relationship. What's that going to look like? Are a lot of their core needs going to get met?
Yeah,
it's very unrelatable. A lot of their core needs aren't going to get met, right? Then what's going to happen is they're going to be unhappy. I'm going to hold back and I'm going to be non-committal because until they're able to get with the program that I'm on, it's hard for me to go down to the program that they're on. They kind of like it because it's not like that stuff is bad. It's pretty fun. They kind of like it, but then they kind of don't. So it kind of goes back and forth like that. So then that becomes frustrating. So me understanding this, it came from me seeing relationships break down and trying to understand what happened. So rather than me saying they're bad because I took them on a $30,000 trip and they couldn't enjoy it, I've got to start to break that down and say, why was I blaming them when they seemed unhappy, when in reality I'm providing them a set of needs that are more attuned to me than to them? And how could I have bridged that gap? Because you could see how when I'm looking at things like an Instagram meme, and the Instagram meme is like, the basic theme of the Instagram meme, which like, in general is kind of like, if you take them on a $30,000 trip and they're just gonna complain, F them, right? And that's what is feeding your brain. And I'm seeing this in my feed, and then I'm just like, say I'm burning down 20, 30K on a beautiful trip and I'm trying to enjoy it, and the person's emotionally dysregulated and in their drama, right? And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, why can't they just enjoy it? It's very, very easy in that Instagram meme mentality to be like, well, F them then, right? But again, what's it not saying? That person's your friend, right? Like that person's your actual friend. They're actually struggling. Like that person's there for you. Like get past the point of like exes or boyfriends or girlfriends. Like let's just get past, like, do you see how they even do that? Like, oh, my ex, oh, my boyfriend, my girlfriend. The operative word in there is friend. People literally forget. That's literally your best friend. That's the person that you're around all the time. Now, it's sort of a dubious thing of calling them your best friend because it's kind of fickle. Like, they're kind of your best friend until they're not your friend at all. But in a way, right? I mean, it's the most fickle best friend you could have. But at the same time, it kind of is still true. It's still your best friend. So one of the things that I had to do when I've seen relationship breakdown is I can feel my brain being kind of monopolized by that Instagram meme mentality of, well, then, like, the main lesson that I got, the first time they complain, get rid of them. Have a better boundary. If I really love myself and I was providing someone with a life like that and they could enjoy it, it means they don't care, F them, right? That's like the place that I feel my brain going. I feel myself being devalued. I feel like if the person loved you, then if you gave them a gift like that, they would actually show gratitude for it, right? But that's not helping anything. What is that really doing? What is that actually teaching me to do if I listen to that kind of mentality? What's it doing? All that it's doing is it's putting me on this loop where every single person that I have around me who can't get my weird mentality, then I'm going to just get rid of them, and then it just becomes a merry-go-round, right? I'm 42. I'd like to have more kids at some point. So, so as much as it's fun being single, and it's pretty fun, and I've certainly built a lifestyle where I can enjoy that fully, what's more fun, you think? Having kids or having like a Hugh Hefner lifestyle? What do you think is more fun? It's actually better to have kids. People forget that. Kids is more common than a Hugh Hefner lifestyle, but it's actually better to have kids. So, and even me at age 42, if I have a kid this year, that kid's not going to be 30 till I'm 72. So do you see how quickly your life can pass you by? So you've got to actually learn how to be in relationships. You've got to act, if you want to have a family, you've got to actually learn how. You can't just keep blowing people off and then medicating it by throwing more logs on the fire. You know what I'm saying, right? Even though it's fun. So you've got to actually get that skill set down. So the thing is that what is emotionally easier for me? Is it to say, look at the lifestyle that I provided. They couldn't enjoy that? F them, right? That's sort of a easy place to go to, right? Because then it's about them, it's not about me. A different kind of place for me to go to is to realize there's almost nobody like me. It's very, very rare. Most people aren't in a life position like that. And a lot of people are still building up their base foundation. They haven't built their foundation. They haven't come into their full self-esteem yet. They haven't built their career yet. They haven't handled their basic needs yet. And then if they're unhappy and their needs aren't being met, and then I'm becoming non-committal or I'm withdrawing, then that's gonna make them even more paranoid because it's like, well, look, I like this whole lifestyle that you're doing, but you're just gonna kick me out of it anyway. Like, yeah, this is really cool, Owen, but you're gonna pull the rug out of me in 2 seconds. So then why should I even be invested in this? This is kind of your thing. This is your little personal journey that you're on. I'm not really a part of this. This is your thing. You see where I'm going with this? So these are a lot of things that, like, for me to understand takes a lot of self-discipline to not go into victimhood and not go into anger and not go into my self-love, personal boundaries diatribe, and I've got to actually look at myself, but that's harder to do than to blame the other person in the Instagram meme mentality. Quick comment?
The foundation thing, you got to respect it's going to take some time. In your early 20s, it was probably going to take until your mid and late 20s. I got into this world when I was 16. I'm 27 now. I just felt like I fully completed my foundation earlier this year. It takes time. It takes a long time.
Yeah, it does, right? It does. And so the thing is that if you don't pause, okay, so again, the main two epiphanies. One, I really, really think a lot of this mentality of like the other is really, really, really bad. It's very, very toxic. Like, again, I really, really wish that everything that I ever read about relationships on like these stupid, I mean, they're great platforms, but like, you know my point, they can be stupid. I wish that it would have just said like, number one, this is your friend. Like, try harder to understand where they're coming from. Because can you see how easy that it would be for me with what I'm trying to bring to the table, that I would have a very low tolerance for like emotional dysregulation and things like that? Can you see how quickly I could tell myself a story of like, look, if you're not happy with this, like, I don't know what I got for you, dude. You know what I'm saying, right? Like we're living a perfect life. Like, how are you not able to be happy? So that would be an easy place for my brain to go, right? But the problem is that that's kind of my default. Like my default, my way of handling things is like, be single for like a year or two, have crazy fun, do the best parties, meet somebody that I like, be with them for like 1, 2, 3 years, and then when they get a bit like inappreciative and annoying, then I get out and then I repeat that cycle. It's pretty fun. Like, it's definitely, compare that to the average chump, like basically has like, their significant other's like this old bag that just hits them with a broom and makes them take out the trash, right? Obviously, I've, achieved a, right? That's certainly a step beyond that. And it's been fun. And I'd recommend it almost to anybody, to tell you the truth. But the thing is that it's like a learning curve. It's not the end destination. Does that make sense? It's a learning curve. It's not the end destination. Because I believe that family is the end destination. So it's one of these things where unless, like, you've got to get that down. So again, main two things. Number one, this person's your friend. Okay, remove, like even if you call your ex, what is that? Like, in a weird way, like, it is your ex. I mean, I'm not trying to get so weird and out there, like, but is it really your ex? Like, yeah, it's your ex. Like, right? Of course it's your ex. But like, even that word, your ex, what's the implications there? discarded out, like just like they did this to you, weren't good to you, you drew the boundary, you loved yourself and finally put yourself first in this super healthy way. That would be one way of looking at it. That's your actual friend. Like if any of you here look at any of your exes and just look at it through this conversation now, does anybody here feel like maybe for like the first time in a long time, like seeing your ex as a human being just in this conversation? Who here feels like that? Put your hand up. Right? Put your hand way up if you feel that way right now. So it's funny how that works, right? Like you're like, what the heck was I thinking? And I'll tell you why that bothers me. It bothers me because I'm somebody who really tries to value objectivity as much as I can. And I feel like when we devalue other people and as a way of conveniently propping ourselves up, you're kind of living in a fake reality. Like that's not what you really think of them at all. You're basically just coping. It's not what you really think. And I've just generally seen self-deception as just not your friend. That's like what I've seen. And the other thing is that when you're devaluing people like that, I just think that can only do bad for you. It just nothing good comes of that. It's also you looking back at your life with so much bitterness, if that makes any sense, right? Like there's like several month or year periods of your life that you just write off of any kind of positive recollection of it because you're like, well, I was with them, things like that, right? And it's like, that's not how you felt at the time at all. Why not just find a middle ground where you're like, that person's like one of my favorite people ever. At that phase in my life and who I was at that time, they were my favorite person ever. At that personal evolution of who I was, I'm a different person today. Like you played with G.I. Joes or Barbies when you were a kid. Doesn't mean that that's your favorite thing now, but it was then. You change. But it doesn't mean that that's bad now. And then just take the value out of it and say, well, most things end and it ended. That would be a healthier viewpoint towards it. It's your friend. But the other one is then you've got to sit there and you've got to actually start looking at yourself and saying, well, what didn't you understand? And that really, really hurts because when you're hurting, it's very, very hard not to have vitriol towards the other person and just be like at a point where you just can't see things in any balanced way. But the problem is, what if you get into another relationship before you've even processed that? What's going to happen then? It's going to 100% repeat. It's going to 100% repeat. And it's probably going to repeat even worse. Because people also rebound as a way to numb the pain that they feel about their previous relationship, to pretend like almost like the breakup didn't happen, just substitute somebody else in. And we've all done it. But how many of you here have had a breakup and then you literally just don't even want to feel it, so you just sub somebody else in, and then it's almost like the breakup didn't happen, but then they weirdly have all these different behaviors that like the ex, and your brain's like even more confused now because say that your ex was really good at, say, cleaning the house up or something like that, right? I'm just giving the most simple example. And then, all of a sudden your new one won't clean the house up, right? And you're like, hey, could you just clean that? And they're like, no. And then you're just in there confused. You're like, what? And then now it's like your brain is like, they're gone, right? It's like this weird thing where all these, and then you start seeing how much you, this is mine, right? Yeah, how much you took things for granted. Then you feel all this guilt about how much you took them for granted and all this kind of stuff. So you've got to be able to process that. So the thing is, very quick, yeah.
Well, it's kind of two things. One, I literally had the exact opposite, where I was actually the rebound, and I thought it was like this real deep thing, and then I got discarded after, and then she went back to the ex that she said all these terrible things about after.
Yep.
So that was kind of a mind-blowing.
You guys hear what he said? He was the rebound. They would tell him all these bad things about the ex, and then they went back, right? And that's because they were using you to try to get escape velocity. Yeah, but they still want it back in.
And the other thing, how would you suggest finding that balance between, okay, yeah, this is my friend, versus, okay, they are crossing certain boundaries that I actually don't.
Well, what I would say is that first of all, it's a mix. Some people tolerate too much, and some people are too intolerant. And so, and the thing is that like I'd say for me, okay, I'll talk about myself and I'll talk about other people. For me, my narrative is I worked for several decades to be able to create a lifestyle for this person that is not only prosperous, but also filled with adventure, connections, like it's not even just about money, it's about like just the day-to-day adventure and all the experiences. Like I'm the kind of person where like I want to go to a different amazing restaurant like 4 or 5 nights a week. I want to go to my friend's house, like I've got cool friends, go to parties. I want to introduce them to a great social circle, put them in a supportive environment, have like free trainers around. Like I try to do all this stuff. Like I try to make an amazing life. So then when somebody isn't happy in it, I get very, very frustrated because I'm like, if I did all this and you can't let it land, then what do you want? You know what I'm saying? But I'm seeing it from a higher level in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm seeing it to where I get too bored at day-to-day things that the average person would like. So it's unrelatable, right? The average person hasn't done all the things that I've done. So, and to take it a little bit further.
I struggle with that too.
Yeah.
I'm the same person where like I can't sit down and cuddle and watch Netflix, but I'm trying to understand that not everybody is like me.
That's the thing, right? And so the thing is though, is like, if you are gonna take them on that adventure, maybe if there was a higher degree of commitment, then they could actually feel more part of it. But without a higher degree of commitment, they know, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna completely rework my brain to go into your reality, but then you could drop me any second, and then I'm back to this. And then I'm also going to not make progress in my foundation, so then you can just leave me in the dust, right? But then I'm surprised that they're not fully bought into what I'm doing. You see where I'm going with this? So it's sort of a balance. I guess what I'm saying is that I have to be able to look at myself and see what is actually causing this. Is this person just emotionally dysfunctional, or is this a gap that I'm not bridging? And if I'm having this problem repeatedly, then who's the common denominator? It's me, right? And then I've also got to say, okay, is it my picker? Is it my compass? Or is it something that I'm generating in an otherwise good, like they call that turning a prince into a frog, right? Turning a prince into a frog. So I don't know what the girl version of that is. I guess a princess into a frog, right? So if you're generating that response, you've got to start to do that. So if you look at what I talked about here, you can see that's the result of a lot of introspection. That's a lot, like what I described here, that's me trying to go first as an example for all of you, as like my own introspection. Is that my final introspection? Would there be other things that I would learn about myself? I'm not sure. There's probably a number of things I could figure out about how I'm creating friction. But the main key is not falling into the trap of just blaming somebody else and saying it's about my self-love and it's about my boundary, because that again is what Instagram is going to hammer you with. So again, the two major lessons. Number one, this is your friend. That's if I could have just remembered that, that's the thing I hate the most. I hate that I let myself, because okay, the thing where you're like, if they're not going to do this, F them, like that whole thing, that to me is kind of like what they call like low vibration energy. That's really what it is, right? Is that really like a high vibe energy? No. It's not. It's pure low vibe. And the problem is, when you hate someone or are mad at them or devalue them, you're carrying that poison in your veins. That's in you. Like that was the biggest thing. Like in the most recent breakup I had, I remember that was the thing that I hated. Was I was like, why am I so mad? And I hated that I was mad. If that makes any sense. I hate that I'm angry. Because I'm not somebody who does well with anger in my veins. Like, I pretty much don't hate anybody. It's like the weirdest thing. Like, I don't feel mad at people. I forgive people very easily. I see the best in people. I don't like focusing on the negative in people. So when I find my brain as like a cope being like blaming somebody else, that it makes my hand shake. Like literally I have videos where you can see like my leg just starts shaking, and it's because that's a poison that's in you. When you carry anger and bitterness towards somebody else, you're poisoned. It's not hurting them at all. I mean, unless you do something crazy, I guess, right, which you shouldn't do. But I'm saying, but like it's not hurting them at all. It's only hurting you. So like I don't do well when I'm just mad at other people or when I'm resentful towards other people. I don't do well. So my pathway out of that is like, I'm like, why is my brain focusing on the negative? It's purely it's because you're hurt. It's a defense mechanism, and it's a way to just stop hurting because you can't handle that maybe you screwed up as well. It's very, very easy to just say, oh, it's just the other person. So my pathway out of that, was the realization like, this person's my friend. Like that was like the first, I think like I was having that poison in me, and then I just like woke up, I'm like, they're my friend. Like that, like I couldn't even see that anymore. It was like, my mind wouldn't even allow me to see that. And then that was one component. And then the other component was, this isn't just the other person's fault, right? Because imagine that you're trying so hard, like you're really giving your absolute best. And then you're like, well, I gave my best to you and it's not enough, right? And that's the thing is like, and then you start to realize you're like, yeah, maybe you did give your best and you did, but it's also that it's not connecting. And why isn't it connecting? And it's very, very easy when you're bringing a lot to just blame somebody else. Very easy. And particularly in a lot of the community that I came from, which involves a lot of things like controlling of the frame control, self-value, delusional confidence. Those are also things that are kind of ingrained into like a lot of the community that I have a background in. And it's all valuable stuff. And you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater because it is valuable. There's a lot of gold there, like a mine of gold there. But at the same time, it's not really equipping you to go past probably 2 or 3 years in a relationship. It's just not. It's not equipping you to go past 2 or 3 years. Now the flip side of this is that if you go too serious on this, you become just this total chump, and you're going to get chumped, right? And so this is where you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you've got to also see the bigger picture. So like I said, my first awareness was like this person's my friend. I'm like, wow, that's weird. Like my brain had to even process that because I was so poisoned. My brain couldn't process that. But then the other one was me talking to my friends and being like, well, what would be unrelatable about what I'm doing? Like, what is it about what I'm doing that's not relatable, right? Because the way that I normally handle these issues, if you want to know my default, is what you call spinning plates. That's my usual way of handling these issues, right? Is basically being non-committal, seeing a few different people, and then basically they are always in competition to get my attention, so they're always bringing their best foot forward. But the problem is it's hard to have children like that. Right? It's hard to do spinning plates and have kids. So it only gets you to a certain point. So the thing is that even when you sort out having higher value and you sort out having frame control and all that, and you sort out even having that little needed touch of competition anxiety without going overboard, the problem is you're still left kind of vulnerable because you haven't sorted out how to connect or relate with the other person. And then the problem is too, is that if you're really into personal growth and you become very successful, well then now there's even more of a gap. This is the laughable thing that people talk about, once you're rich, you're gonna attract more people. That's not necessarily true. It can actually create sort of a gap between where you're at and where the other person's at actually. There's like a really big disconnect because they're trying to handle their foundation, but you've already handled your foundation. So it's a very, very big disconnect actually, okay? So then that's that next part is the self-auditing. The self-auditing, looking at yourself and resisting venting with your friends. Like a lot of my friends, the way that they try to vent to me or the way they'll talk to me about it is they're like, that person's crap, they didn't appreciate you, they didn't value you. If they valued you, they would have done this. If they valued you, they would have done that. Clearly their behavior shows they didn't love you, it was fake, they're crap, they're not on your level, you're perfect, they suck. Like it's just a lot of that. What is that, guys? It's pure cope. It's cope. It's just like pure cope. Well, it's like I said, first epiphany, that person is your friend. I don't know if I want to use words like best friend because I don't know if you could truly say a romantic relationship's your best friend because like ultimately it is still a bit more fickle than like, a same-sex best friend or even an opposite-sex best friend, or whatever best friend. But you know my point, right? Like it's a bit different. But it's the realization like, stop thinking of this person as your ex. Just think of them as your friend who's currently maybe not the best to be there anymore, but they're your friend, right? That now you're actually seeing them as a human being. You're not devaluing them or dehumanizing them. That begins to get the poison out of your system. Then from there, because that was the big thing that I noticed was like thinking of my ex as an ex was poisoning me because I'm seeing this person as this person that hurt me badly. And I'm seeing it like that. I'm not seeing it as, because I'm seeing it as this person that I just poured into, and it's just never enough, right? But so then you see them as your ex, like then you're viewing them as this representation of when you finally found self-respect. You see where this goes? Because Instagram and TikTok brainwashes you. They're like this dragon to slay metaphorically. This like metaphorical dragon to slay of like, I didn't respect myself, now I do respect myself, I don't take their crap, and it's like, that's still your friend. Like they did what they could. I mean, assuming it wasn't actually some psycho, right? Like I'm going off an assumption here it wasn't like some total psycho. Maybe it was, might be appropriate to, if you're with some psycho. But like notice how everybody on social media thinks their ex is a narcissist. Like I could literally make a surviving narcissism channel right now and it will blow up. And the whole channel could just be like, look at this, they devalued you, they did this to you, they did that to you, and everyone's like, yeah, right? And there's like nothing in it that's looking at yourself, okay? And then the other thing, and again, this is the work to be done after any broken relationship, and that could be a friendship, that could be a business partnership, or romantic relationship, is if you're at a point where you're out of the cope, and you can actually see it, you've got to be able to look at what you did. what did I do? And so, I tried to kind of go first here. And, I'm sitting up here leading a seminar. That's probably an uncommon thing for someone leading a seminar to do. Usually when they're leading a seminar, like, I have this and that. I'm probably doing a bit of that too. But I'm trying to show, what the flaws are, right? Areas that could be annoying, areas that could be that, to you guys might seem cool, to somebody who met me for a night might seem cool, to somebody who I'm seeing casually and, they're hoping that I'm going to call them on a Wednesday night could think are cool. But when you're just around it all the time, you're just always around it all the time, and it just starts to wear you down. Things that would seem good on, things like success in entrepreneurship, which on the surface could seem good, but are not, are actually annoying, even though it seems good. But, to create that reality is a process. So the next one, like I said, is actually auditing your toxic tendencies. This is what Instagram's not covering. This is what in a 30-second Instagram reel, they're not covering. What are you doing wrong? So I tried to give some examples here of some areas that I've gone wrong. I'd like you guys to do an exercise, and I'd like you to do the exact same thing that I did. Okay, and it's going to be a two-pronged exercise. I'd like you to talk to each other about why somebody who hurt you that was involved in your life is actually your friend, even if it hurts. That's the first thing you're going to do in this exercise. Somebody that blew you off, discarded you, devalued you or hurt you. I mean, unless it was, look, if this was honestly a sociopath, if this was honestly a narcissist, if this was honestly a real personality disorder or somebody who's just demonically possessed, then you don't need to do it with them, okay? That's fine, if it really was. But I promise you, there's like X amount of people in the world, and it just seems like everybody thinks their ex has NPD at this point. Okay, narcissistic personality disorder. Like everybody just convinced that they dated a narcissist. Like everybody's convinced of this. Right? So, and the ratio of like, I dated a narcissist to I suck is so skewed. Okay, it's so skewed. So I'm not telling you to say that you suck. I don't think that I suck. I don't think any of you guys suck. But what I'm saying is like, number one, how could you rehumanize somebody that was in your life so that you don't carry that poison to them anymore? You can find forgiveness. Okay? Yeah, because I'm telling you, for me, holding on to that kind of darkness in me is so, it's like black goop. Like I don't do well like that. You guys, who here has ever read the Sermon on the Mount? Who here's ever read that? Sermon on the Mount. Okay, that is so terrible, but go read that, okay? But the main teaching in Christianity is actually forgiveness. You guys know that? That's the main teaching. And I mean, I guess that's debatable, but it's like a central teaching is forgiveness. It's a major, major part. I would recommend that all of you go read the Sermon on the Mount, okay? The best one, go to YouTube, David Suchet, go look that up. Read the sermon on the, listen to the audio. David Suchet, which is probably pronounced Suchet or something, is like the Michael Jordan of Bible readers. Okay, like that guy was born to just read the Bible. So go listen to an audio version. The Sermon on the Mount's about 15 minutes. Listen to it 5 or 10 times, and it talks a lot about forgiveness. Look at that, about not dehumanizing people. Look at that, because why is that? Why is that such a central tenet? Well, in Christianity, what they'd be saying is that you don't get into heaven if you're not sort of, I guess you might almost call it like, I guess your verbiage could vary, but you almost might call it like purified, or, if you're somebody who's not positive. Like God wouldn't want to hang out with you for eternity if you're just some negative weirdo, is basically the concept of it, right? Why is God going to hang out with some negative, angry weirdo for eternity? So the idea of cleansing yourself is like getting that black goop out of yourself. And I'm telling you, as somebody myself where I forgive people probably too easily, I just forgive people easily. When I can't forgive somebody, my public speaking gets worse, my videos get worse, my health gets worse, everything just gets worse. Everything gets worse when I don't forgive people. That doesn't mean that you have to let them keep doing it or that you have to run back to them, right? I think people, they struggle to forgive because they're afraid they're going to run back. Like, if I forgive you, I'm just going to get spontaneously, I think they even have a word for it. They call it hoovered. I'm going to get hoovered back in like a vacuum. That's actually a word in a lot of like that kind of talking. They're afraid they're going to get hoovered back in. Don't be at a point where you're going to get hoovered back in, but just find forgiveness. I'm telling you, if you don't forgive people, it's just hurting you. It's hurting your health. It's hurting everything in you. It's shrinking. It's probably shrinking parts of your brain. It's probably giving you immune system issues. I'm not a doctor. I can't say that, but it probably is. I'm just guessing. I'm not a doctor. I have no double study on that or whatever, but I'm just guessing. It's probably giving you all sorts of issues. So you got to find ways to forgive people. For me, like I said, the path to forgiveness was the humanization, being like, that's my best friend. Whoa, that's crazy. That's crazy. Doesn't mean it has to be my best friend for life. Doesn't mean that I can't evolve to another step. You know, I'm always changing. I'm not the same person year on year. So, you know, same way that my best friend in the 5th grade is not my best friend now, but I can acknowledge that in those years of my life that was my best friend. I've got to acknowledge that. And then from there, I've got to say, hey, we're not going to be in contact, but I'm always here for you. Like, you can call me for anything you want till the day you're dead, and I'm going to be there. You know, even if it's not healthy for us to hang out, I'm going to be there till the day that you die. Till the day you're dead. Till the day you're dead or I'm dead, you need something, I'm right here. It's done forever. Okay, and that's selfish for me. Do you guys see that? Because that means that I've forgiven the situation. So I'm getting that out of myself. So I want that to be selfish for you. That doesn't, again, I think a lot of you guys are scared to do that because you're afraid you're going to run back. You're like, but then if I'm nice, we're going to run back and then repeat the cycle. I'm not saying to go repeat the cycle. Yep.
So going back to the Bible, it even says in the scripture that if you have an offering, leave your offering and go back. If you have a problem with your brother, go back and forgive him.
Yes.
So that's part of the.
It's
Bible.
massive.
Yeah, it's super massive.
Yep.
I say it because I'm a Christian myself.
Yeah, I've also seen this in my organization where I've seen people in my organization litigate against each other, and watching the damage that does is it's the saddest thing you've truly ever seen. It's just years of lost time, lost money, lost energy. I never comment on it, so I think a lot of people think that I somehow mess around with that stuff. No, okay, no. Like, I'm just like, do what you got to do. Like, you know what I'm saying? I can't stand that stuff. So forgiveness, massive. Okay, how do you humanize another person? You're not carrying that in you. And then the other one is, what are you going to look at in yourself? So what I did was, once I was able to come to that forgiveness, it took me a couple weeks, then the next thing that I did was I went into self-examination. I wanted to understand, if I'm just being real, okay, and this is going to sound arrogant, I couldn't understand how I was pouring that much into it and I couldn't get the win. And to be honest, I think a lot of it was me being non-committal, but the pattern was I'm pouring into it, they're not receiving it to the extent that I felt comfortable with, then I'm uncommittal and I'm pulling back in major, major ways. Like, I'm pulling back in ways that are probably pretty inappropriate. If I'm being real with you, highly inappropriate the way that I'm pulling back. Highly 10 out of 10 inappropriate the way that I'm pulling back. Like, super not cool. But I don't feel comfortable to commit more because I'm pouring into this at a 10 out of 10. And I'm not seeing any outcome that I would think is that I'm okay with, or that I think would be appropriate to the effort I'm putting in. And then it's creating a disconnect. So, but that is me understanding myself more, okay? Me seeing, why am I generating that pattern again and again? Because what would it say about me if I'm 42 now and I'm 52 and I'm sitting here at 52 and I'm like, you know what I've learned? Just spin those plates, man, right? You know, I'm like, they don't like it, F them, right? And it's like, dude, you're 52. I'm like, that's how I roll till death, you know, right? Like, you know, so, you know, and as somebody who wants to have more children, you can't use the paradigms of like the community that I, you know, helped to shape. You can't really use those past 1 to 3 years. For 1 to 3 years, amazing. Like you'll never find anything better. But you can't do that. You can't just use like competition anxiety or like threat to withdraw. That doesn't work to have kids, guys. It just doesn't. So you do have to select somebody who is able to process what you bring to the table, and you want to be your best self, and you do want to have a degree of competition anxiety so the person just recognizes you as desirable. But that can't be the main driver, if that makes sense. That can't be the driver of holding a relationship together, okay? So there has to be, you have healthy and unhealthy relationships. I've definitely had great health in my relationships, like really, really, really good health. Like, people would see me with like people that I'm with, they're like, you guys are like the best couple. I've never seen anything like that. Like, people will say that. But I've seen that like I do hit walls. And I think and my go-to, you know what my problem is? It's just the grass is so greener. As soon as I have a breakup, my life gets so good, right? So it's like, as soon as we have a breakup, I've got like, you know, all the people that I used to kind of see and stuff like that, and they're all, it's like a celebration. Like, the breakup happens, it's like there's fireworks, Owen's back, the parties are back on, he's available, people that I used to date back in the day come back around, new people come around, you know, it's like, yeah! So, you know, but the problem is, so it becomes a temptation, right? So I'm creating this bit here, because we're recording it, as a bit of an end cap to a lot of my sort of dating content, because I want to show, you know, other levels to this, not just like showing that first component. Quick thing there.
So as someone who is very involved with that old world, thank you, Owen, man, because something that I've been low-key frustrated about is watching individuals in that community refuse to evolve. So thank you.
Well, thank you, bro.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah. Thanks, bro. He's been around a long time, so he gets it. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's
and everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bro. Yeah, so you guys that have seen all this stuff, you're like, okay, there's the next thing. Yeah, but again, because it for me, a lot of it is about the kids. That's the big thing, is about the kids, right? Because I love kids. You guys see me always out my kids, right? So I want to have more kids. So it's this thing where it's like if I'm being honest with you, if it wasn't for the kids thing, I kind of wouldn't mind just continuing exactly how I'm doing. To be honest with you, right? Like, because it's fun, right? People might be like, that doesn't sound fun. No, you're lying.
Yeah.
It's incredibly fun. Like, I've had so much, like, since my last breakup, my life has only gotten 500 times more fun. But the point is, I have no kids from that, right? Where's the kids? You know, so it's this kind of thing where it's like, and you remember what I was saying earlier about how things get repetitive for me? That's what I'm saying, is that at a certain point, is that you've done that, like you've done the club thing, you've done the party thing, you know, you've been the man. So it's like, okay, but now I want to have kids. So I want to do the next thing. And so if you guys see me when I'm happiest, it's when I'm out skiing with my kids, or I'm out in nature with my kids, or I'm giving lessons to my kids. I spent half an hour teaching Dylan the Sermon on the Mount yesterday. You know, like that's the moments that for me, as you're getting older in your 40s, that's like the next level, kind of continuing down the path, right? So for me, I kind of have the foundation of meeting people at a good level, but I want to go to that next level. So for me, even though it's fun, it's just a sensory feeling. It's like a lot of sensory feelings. But what did I say about entrepreneurship? To get to the next level in entrepreneurship, you usually have to get to a point where you're not run by sensory feelings anymore. So I'm not run that much by if I feel happy or if I feel sad, because I'm kind of in a Zen state to an extent. So it's like, I just feel the same anyway. So what I tend to feed off of is, just being real with you, is I feed off the energy of the expansion of life. Like, I feel good just seeing a big forest and like wild animals, forests, nature, new children, life being created, art, real love, real friendship, expansion. As you get older, you're less about your ego, even though I have a stupid huge ego, but I'm just saying, like, but it erodes over time. And what it really is what you call the energy of life. Just say that with me so you remember. Say the energy of life. Yeah, so the energy of life is like why is it that Christian people, you know, believe in having, say, a lot of children or things like that, right? What does that mean? It's because you believe in the energy of procreation, that, you know, that fount, like basically from beyond the ether, you know, beyond the ether of like the energy of source is that fount of life. You know, you might call that the Big Bang, you know, from a science perspective, but that fount of life, of that energy that's moving out. So as like a little human, as like this little, you know, evolved monkey on a spinning rock, we're on this little tiny rock. It's like such a insignificant, tiny part of the whole galaxy. It's like, it's laughable how small it is, but it's still our world. Like, it's still, this is like what we live in, it's what we know. So even though it's small compared to the whole galaxy, it's still our whole world anyway. And so when you kind of connect to the energy of life, you're less about, when you're past getting your foundation down and your ego handled, you're more about creating real art, real contribution, real friendship, loving people unconditionally. Like, even what I said about recognizing an ex as your best friend, that comes down to something that you call unconditional love. Unconditional love is a very different kind of love than, oh, you're doing something for me, so therefore I love you, right? It's, to me, if you would not tell your ex that you'd be there for them for the rest of your life, you never loved them. It was literally just what you were getting out of it. And you're actually staining the last period of time that you spent with them. That whole period is stained because all that it was this elaborate transaction. That's all that it was an elaborate transaction. And then what does that say about your future relations if you're doing that, right? So yeah, it's just gonna be Groundhog Day. So it doesn't mean that you have to go back to someone who you had dysfunction with, and it doesn't mean that you have to become best friends and then annoy their current spouse, right? Like, they're hanging out with you all like that. Well, that's my best friend now, so I just hang out with my ex all day instead of you know? Like, that would be weird. That's not normal, right? I'm not saying anything like that, but it's more of like an acknowledgement, like, hey, you know what? For that period of my life, you've been my best friend. You know, I'm sorry for my side of what happened, and I'm always there for you. And then you can just let that go, you know, let it go, and, you know, maybe see, you know, and then what I think is kind of cool is like find some little area that you could help them somewhere. You know what I mean, right? Like, you know, some of my exes do social media. Doesn't mean I'm gonna call them every day, but maybe once a year, like, hey, I saw this on your social media, you're killing it, great job. And, you know, if I could help you with it, you let me know. You know, you kind of can find like a neutral space where you can acknowledge them and support them without making them have a fight with their current boyfriend or girlfriend, or, you know, making things weird, okay? But that's kind of like a healthier place to find it, or not. but at least you put it out there is kind of the thing, right? Then you've done your end of it, okay? So again, let's go into this exercise. And do you guys, let me do a quick quiz. What is the exact purpose of why I'm getting you to do this? What is the reason I'm getting you to do this before we jump in the exercise? Letting go. Yep. What else?
Enhance your self-awareness.
What's that? Enhancing your self-awareness. Yep. What else? Going to the next level. What else?
Focus on other better things in life.
Focus on what?
On positive things in life.
Being a positive person. Yeah. What else?
Not being so transactional.
Not being just a transactional-oriented person. Yeah. What else?
Learning to reframe negative situations in your favor.
Yeah. Reframing things better. But here's the thing. I'm going to get to the core of it. It's to cleanse the poison out of you.
Yeah, let go of that.
Okay? It's to cleanse the poison out of you. It's to truly heal. It's to truly be the kind of person that you're aspiring to be, but it also frees up bandwidth. Okay? Like, I'm somebody who's very, very sensitive to how much bandwidth I have because I do improvised public speaking. Remember, I'm not up here with a script, right? So I do improvised public speaking, and I also do my social skills improvise out when I'm out. So bandwidth for me is everything, okay? I'm also really, really big on inner vitality. So a big thing that I would attribute to that, I'm not a scientist, I've never done studies on this, but just what I personally guessed is freeing up bandwidth has been the big, big thing that I've really, really focused on. Like my whole life is just letting go of inner friction. Letting go of inner friction, letting go of outer friction, okay? So as long as you think of somebody that was in your life in the past as like your enemy, not as your friend, as your ex, which again, they're your ex. I'm not trying to be so like Andy Warhol here, like it's not your ex, man, it's your friend. Like I'm not trying to do that, but it's like at the same time, if you're using those, those dehumanizing connotations of that, and then you're basically taking someone who you have all these positive memories with, and then you're like poisoning that with gas, and then that's searing in your brain and in your spirit. I mean, why is the single most important thing, in my view anyway, in the Sermon on the Mount, the single most important thing is forgiveness? Why is that? Because God doesn't want to kick it with you for eternity if you're some weird, jaded weirdo, right? If you're some jaded weirdo who's like, my ex did this, and they suck, and I'm the best, and like all that kind of stuff. God's just like, we're whack. Burn, right? And even though that may be a cartoonification, and it probably is, but there's still something to that as sort of an analogy. You could even just make the basic argument as someone who's not a spiritual type personality, you could just make the argument that heaven or hell begins now. Heaven or hell begins today, right? Even if you didn't go anywhere after you died and this was your life, well then this is infinity to you. So either, whatever you believe, that's still the case. So heaven or hell starts today. So the big thing, you had a quick question there too, by the way?
I just have an example of how.
Oh yeah, okay, lay it out and then I'll go in the exercise, yeah, real quick.
So I know someone very closely who's like the extreme of what you said.
Yeah.
They have no ability to self-audit at all.
Yes.
They keep doing the same thing over and over in their relationships.
Yeah.
They are now about a little bit older than you.
Yeah.
They have the same failed relationships every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
They actually got physical ailments from it, and they loop on the same people over and over again.
Yeah, just sitting there looping on these people that burnt you, and then physical ailments. You see where this is going?
Near death.
And near death.
Yeah.
The bitterness just builds and builds and builds. And this was in my last relationship, because I certainly have had a lot of those, I've certainly found myself sitting there, if I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's usually me talking about people who I used to work with, who I really built up and poured into, and then they just super discard me. And I'd be sitting there 4 years later, I'm like, how could they do that? Because it's the devaluation. Do you guys see this? When you're discarded like that, you're just discarded and you can't even understand why. You get devalued to the point that it starts to mess with your core self-esteem. You can't eat, you've been so devalued that it's like a poison in you that's running you. And at a certain point, you've got to realize maybe that person isn't coping. Maybe they're doing this thing called splitting where they either idealize or demonize you. Maybe they're not strong enough not to do that. And they did love you, and there's a part of them that still does, but they just couldn't help it. And that doesn't mean that you're an unvaluable person. But that was one that hit me for years, and that's why I would loop on that. And so with my more recent one, it kind of brought that to a head. It brought that to a head where it was just I felt devalued to the point that I'm just I guess I'm just that crap. So many people in my life that I poured into are just F you. And I'm just is this really my legacy? This is just what I am? And it's no, it's not. It's I'm trying. I'm doing my best. but I'm also kind of intense. You know what I'm saying, right? I'm kind of an intense person. I'm kind of an unrelatable person. I'm in a phase of life that not a lot of people have gotten to, and as a result, it's hard to relate to. It sounds good on paper, but in reality, it might not be as good, and that's just what it is. It just is what it is. So you've either got to find people that are in the same mode, which is hard, or you've got to help bring people up to that level or relate to them to where they're at, and that's just it, or you're going to be on Groundhog Day, is basically what it is. But again, let's just bring it back that last point and then go in the exercise. It's about freeing up mental bandwidth and just getting the poison out of your system and how that will benefit you. So the 2 exercises, like I've repeated so many times, number 1, recognizing that someone is your friend and humanizing them. Anybody that you're mad at, humanize them, because this helped me tremendously. And number 2, recognizing the flaws in yourself, not on them, and resist the urge to be like, well, you know, I could have done better like this, but they did this and this and that, right? Like, don't do that. Because trust me, I do that, right? It's like, it's so hard to just totally own it and not just keep bringing it back to them. Totally own it. You just, even if it was 90% them, I don't care. Whatever's your chunk, and that's not for you to think about at this point, they're gone. Own your chunk of it, of what you would learn and do better. And you know what? It might even take you a couple more relationships to get it down. You might goof up a couple more times. But at least if you have it down, you're learning something. And guess what? If the other person isn't doing that, what's going to happen to them?
They're not going to grow.
They're probably not going to grow too much. I mean, unless they just magically land on the perfect person with the perfect concoction of ingredients to handle all their neurosis, right? Unless that actually happens, they're going to be in Groundhog Day. Do you want to be stuck in that same Groundhog Day? Absolutely. You want to be stuck in that? Okay, so 2 exercises. Like I said, number 1, humanize somebody who you're mad at, so you're not an Instagram reality. And number 2, self-audit. Let's take about 10 or 15 minutes to do that, and then we're going to go on a totally different topic. Take 10 or 15 minutes to do that? Yes. Okay, let's take 10 or 15 minutes to do that. Okay, good stuff, okay? Get in your groups, and then we're going to crank a whole other segment after, okay, guys?
How do you even begin to forgive everyone? Like you talked
It's not something you do mechanically where you're like, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. That's actually a great question, by the way. It's the mental point of orientation that you're coming from. If you don't believe that you could be destroyed or hurt, then you're not going to carry that anger. So really what that anger is designed to do is to take you away from connection to your spirit. It's actually designed to connect you into your ego. It's designed to connect you into your body. That's actually what it's there to do. Specifically, by the way. Specifically, that's what its function is. Okay, so the people that are doing this to you, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take you out of presence, and they're trying to get you to inflict that, to have that damage inflicted on you. So you really got to understand that's what's actually happening. So do you understand? What you're seeing as somebody hurting you is not actually that. They're being run by a certain energy. That energy is running them, and they're trying to get you to identify with your body. That's it. That's all it is. Got it? Okay. So if you knew right now that you were a gazillionaire, let's say you had unlimited money, not even a billionaire, unlimited. You could fly everywhere. You could snap your fingers and be anywhere in the world in 1 second. You're never, ever, ever going to die. You not only could hook up with anybody who you want, but you could literally just imagine hooking up with whoever you want and have that feeling, and have feelings far greater and more ecstatic than that. You could never die. You could do anything you want. You're infinite. Could anybody ever hurt your feelings? Not easily, right? So if you identify at a soul level, then you're not going to be offended by what people are doing. So what they're doing is that they're being run by negative energy, and then they're trying to get you to identify in your body as a limited meat suit. And then they pull you into that identification, and then they suck you into hell. Ideally, you not only get pulled into that, but then you retaliate. This is why it is so incredibly important that when people are bad to you, that you not only forgive them, but you even go do something nice for them. Mm-hmm. You must go do something nice for them. Oh, it's great. It's actually funny to see the reaction too. But it's not even done for that. It's done to actually be nice. It's not something where you're like, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. It's the mental point of orientation that you're coming from. It is a limitation on your part. It is a limitation that you believe that you can be hurt. So that shows your own limiting beliefs. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Yeah, so what happened in my case was somebody who I had done more for than anyone in my entire life. I've never done more for a person in my whole life. Ask them that, they'd probably tell you the opposite, but I really had. And loved more than anyone I loved in my whole life. And literally poured into more than I poured in my whole life. But I also did things wrong too, don't get me wrong. Just turned sideways in ways that I never thought possible. And so that was like the final boss for me as far as forgiveness. Because what it did was, there was a number of people who I had struggled to forgive over the years. And I could, the thing is for me is like, I'm pretty clean internally generally. But what happens is that I can still get kind of stuff under my skin a bit here and there. And so generally, when I'm in absence of other like negative people, then I'm always like in the best mood you've ever seen. Like you'll never see me like being like weird or like, I'm just like chill, you know, like I'm always having fun. I'm usually cracking jokes. I'm laughing, like I'm chill. So the thing is like, but there was a lot of people over the years that had really let me down. And I would kind of find myself kind of going back to those disappointments again and again and kind of replaying them, being like, man, how could they do that? Like, that's so crazy, you know? And finally, you know, seeing like the most important person do that, and after they had observed other people doing that and been like, oh, that's so terrible, you don't deserve it. And seeing that, it was this thing where it was like so many layers of vulnerability and shield had been let down. So to have that happen is such a devaluation and a discarding and sickening. And a lot of people, when devalued or discarded, it can actually cause people to kill themselves. You know, when you've really opened yourself up to someone that much and they just use you like toilet paper, it can really mess with your mind in ways that like you can't even imagine. And, you know, I would find like, I'd be sitting there and like, my leg would start shaking. I'm like, man, this like really messed me up. Like, this is really dark, because it starts to get you in this point where you're like, how can you ever trust another human being? How can you, you know, what is reality? You know, they go into a place where they can't handle what they've done. And so then they need to demonize in order to justify their own behavior. And so you can't even talk to them about it because they're in such shame. And so their mind is using projection as a shield of shame. And so what winds up happening is, you know, I felt poisoned in ways I've never felt that poisoned in my life, actually. It was just pure, raw poison. And the first way that I thought about it, my first thought was like, man, I gotta have better boundaries. Like, if people do this, like, I should just never speak to them again. They should just be dead to me. Like, I've repeated this behavior too much. I can't believe I've let this happen again. And it really, really, really affected me greatly. You know, I wouldn't have even needed much, you know, to move past. Like a simple apology of like, hey, you know, that wasn't cool. I'm really sorry. Like, I would have been like, you know what, it's all good. I'm so silly like that. But can't even do that, right? And so, you know, so the thing is like, you know, you could spend years around somebody and then it's like, they're gone, you know? It's almost like they died. And then not only that, but then they hate you, you know? And so it's one of these things where, and then it takes years of your life and it recontextualizes them. You're like, what were the last years of my life? Like, who was I with? You know, and so I realized like, okay, I know what this is. I understand what this is. I get it now. You know, I've had an unhealed wound from a lot of people that have done things. And it's a limitation in my own mind that anybody can hurt me, because they actually can't. You see this? If somebody behaved in that manner, well, first of all, I'm not perfect. There's things that I did wrong. I actually spent a lot of time thinking about that. So the first thing you gotta do is you gotta think about what you did wrong, what you brought negative into the equation. There's plenty that I did that was negative in the equation. I don't think it justifies what happened, but I certainly brought plenty negative in the equation. So I tried to think a lot about that. And what the conclusion that I came to with that was, I allowed small little lapses of, you know, LVE, like low vibration energy, to get in the mix. And I believed that, you know, the ends justifies the means. And so there's areas that I could be lightly out of integrity. But I thought as long as like they're benefiting hugely, that it's worth it. And, you know, I thought, you know, it's all going to work out in the end. I'm kind of just balancing, you know, I'm kind of trying to juggle these different balls. I've got different things coming at me, different goals that I'm trying to achieve. And so it's like, you know, maybe you kind of like make some exceptions off of your core values a little bit to help them. Because frankly, if you don't, they're going to be screwed and they don't even realize it. So you're kind of trying to like help them. But what I realize now is I have to be very militant about like don't complain about people, don't have lack of gratitude for people, don't feel like a victim, don't ever complain. You know, you can talk to friends and try to process what happened in the spirit of processing it to try to get out of your system, but if it's you just venting to feed the beast, no. You've got to come back to the highest good. You've got to come back to core principles. Like, I look at some of the people that I've spent my life with, and I'm like, what if we had just never had an argument and just rediverted all that time into helping the world? And like, how would that have even solved a lot of the problems that we had by, you know, because think about how small it is to be bickering. It's very, very small. And so getting sucked into bickering is a waste of time, a waste of life's potential. Yeah, spitting in God's face, yeah. And so I've just got to a point where, you know, even if it kills me, I just want to be in top integrity that I'm able to be in. I just want to do things the right way, treat people perfect. Like, I kind of just want to be like perfect, to be honest with you. Like, that's kind of where my mindset is. That's a high bar, but I'm also 43 this month. So like, I'm not going to say to someone in their 20s, you got to be perfect, or even somebody 43 that's never worked on themselves, but like, what excuse do I have? I don't really have an excuse at this point. You know, it's like, okay, man, like, can you just get it together? You know, you're in your mid 40s, you've had all these blessings, all these incredible things in your life, like, just get it together. So, you know, for me, I've got to really understand like God's plan for my life and why I'm here, and I've got to really just zero in on that. It's not like, it's not really about me anymore. You know, it's not like I'm past the point of like any of this being about me or my disappointment. Like, because something like that when it happens is so disgusting and it's so demoralizing that, you know, if you make it about you, like, you almost get to a point where you're like, how could I ever be happy again? Because you're looking at the world and how messed up it is, and you're like, this is what I live in? Like, how could I ever find love? How could I ever, you know, have a friend? Like, how could I even see the world the same after that? Like, it's just so vomit-inducing and sickening, and it's just like, I don't even want to be alive anymore. Like you start hitting a point where it's like, you're seeing the world so accurately as far as like not able to just look at the surface of it. And I think a lot of people, like, they can easily dismiss these experiences like, well, screw them then, like, they're losers. And it's like, that's your best friend for several years and they're a loser? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't just let yourself off the hook like that. Well, then you can say, well, it's my fault too, and you can look at yourself, and you can look at all the things that you did wrong, but then you're like, but that still doesn't warrant that. So it's one of these things where it's like, the only real way out of something like that in forgiveness is, really, it's like what it says in the Bible, like, about forgiveness is like spot on, which is like, don't look at the chip in your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own eye. Stop blaming the other. Like, that was my first thing that I did, was I was so angry that I wanted to blame the other person, and I could feel the poison in me from that. And I'm like, well, then I've got to just teach myself a lesson to, like, you know, like because I'm very, very forgiving, but I feel like to an extent that allows people to behave in that manner. It's not pragmatic, but, you know, so I started thinking, like, my first reaction was, I'm like, maybe I need to, like, go after people when they act like this, because, you know, I'm so unpragmatic that even like the close people in my life just think that they can do that. You know, and that was like my first reaction. I thought maybe that was the answer. But then I noticed that even that thought was poisoning me more, right? And again, I'm living generally in a pretty clean place. So it's like when I let in filth in myself, it's almost like somebody who eats really clean and then they eat like a milkshake and a pizza. Like, energetically, I have pretty clean thoughts generally. Not perfect, I'm just saying it's generally pretty clean. So it's like, so if I start letting that in, like, it makes my legs shake, it makes my hand shake, and like, it's like the wrong fuel. Like, I don't do well off that fuel of anger or resentment. I just don't do well off of that. Some people are fueled so deeply by resentment that they can't let it go, actually. If you say to somebody you need to forgive, they're like, I can't, because it's fueling them. That's actually what happens also when you hurt somebody and you do the wrong thing, then you can justify your resentment, and then that resentment fuels you. And then you become that, you go very dark. And then that's when the weed breaks out, and they will get addicted on weed and drugs after, inevitably, because they've got to stuff what they've done. So, and they've got to stuff what they're being empowered by. It's disgusting. You lose yourself. It's very bad. So what happens is, I had to train myself of like, well, why am I struggling to forgive? Well, it's because I think they could hurt me. Now, what if it's like the closest person in your whole life, right? And somebody who you open up to that much? Well, first step is you have to look at your own mistakes. Second step is you have to start looking at like what they did or why they felt how they felt. You've got to realize that they have their own limitations. You've got to realize that there's things in that way that you related to them that were wrong, your behavior that was wrong, limitations that they have. And then you've got to realize that as an eternal being, you are not able to be harmed by anybody. And actually that they will eventually come into their evolution, whether that is through them going right down into hell and burning for what they've done, and eventually being cleansed of that, or whether, like they'll figure that out someday, but someday they will figure that out. Could be millions and millions of years, but they'll figure that out. You'll figure out what you need to figure out. You're also gonna make mistakes. You're also gonna do things that are wrong by people. You did do wrong things by that person for sure. You should probably focus on those things that you did, regardless that you did things well. You should focus on those things that you did. After you focus on those things that you did for a period of time that's sufficient to where you understand it, that will make you better for future people in your life. And then basically, from there, you can also look at the good things that you did so you can forgive yourself. You've got to then forgive yourself. So focus less on forgiving them, but look first at what you did wrong and forgiving yourself. Then also forgive them too. Realize their limitations. Realize that they'll eventually figure it out. It's not for you to figure it out. And that you'll see each other in some future, version of reality that we don't even have an understanding of.
What they did is between them and God.
What they did is 100% between them and God. And it's not for you to fully understand. And they probably are not even in a position to understand it. And that trauma or that disgusting knife that's put in your back can actually be used as a way to reaffirm and reconnect to your eternal soul. So it's when life becomes so uncomfortable in the physical that it regrounds you into that. So that was something that I truly had never hoped to experience. I was like, I hope that at this age I would just never have to experience that. But then I had to be honest with myself and look at things that I was doing, breaches in integrity that I had, and ways that I didn't, keep the LVE out of the gates. And I justified it, and I could show you how I justified it, and you'd be like, you're pretty nice, right? You could see that. They benefited a lot. But the point is that I still let LVE inside the gates. So the change that I made was that I have a much higher standard now. I will not let LV inside the gates again, ever. I'm like militant on that. I'm just not going to do it. I just don't think it leads to anywhere. I just don't think it leads to anything good. I don't think anything good comes of it. I just think it's a waste of time. It's just like you're just having to relearn the same lessons again and 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 again. At what point you just say, I get it, okay? I get it. I've learned. I'm going to do better. How many times do you need to get a spanking before you get it? So I have shifted that focus onto my own responsibility. I put it on myself, both in terms of anything of my behavior that I could have done better, and I've examined that in depth, and I put that shift onto me, never letting negative energy into myself, and recentering myself onto my life's purpose, and recentering myself on what it is that I'm here to do. And it's no longer about me, because my life has got to a point where I've seen too much. It can't be about me anymore. My life can't be about me anymore. It doesn't mean to get all weird and like deny yourself anything good and like whip yourself or anything like weird like that. But just like coming from a place of such fulfillment and gratitude for the gifts that you've already received and saying, I've been given so much. Why am I getting salty about this? I've got so much to accomplish. I've got so much to do. There's so much to be happy about, so much to be grateful about. There's going to be different people at different phases of their evolution. You're going to make mistakes. Stuff happens. Keep moving forward. There's a great future ahead, and go from there. Because there's a point where you could be so heartbroken and it just breaks you permanently. Like you're never able to, look at people the same way again. And when you see that capacity for evil inside of people, you're just like, wow. But then again, you've got to keep coming back to yourself. Well, how did I let low vibration energy in the gates? Where was I out of integrity? Where's my role in this? And most importantly is, how am I bigger than this? How can I forgive myself for where I failed? How can I forgive them for where they failed and come into a state of peace? Right? Now for me, I'm at peace with this person. So for me, I love them. I'll be nice to them whenever they want. I'll always be there for them. I have no anger whatsoever. But I think for them, they have to hang on to that anger, because once someone's behaved in that manner, they are forced to use resentment as fuel. because they have to use projection as fuel. And so they're no longer able to see reality correctly. And then the inevitability when someone does that is drug use, burying themselves from it, hiding themselves from it, weird shifts in identity, and so on and so forth. And you're going to see a lot of stuff like that. And it's sad. So that's also why you should not do bad by other people, so that you don't make that same mistake. But you're going to do certain things bad. And again, you've got to own that, realize what you've done, and forgive them, and they've got to forgive you. But I'm telling you, the idea of how human beings hurt each other and the idea of how human beings offend each other and do wrong by each other is a very, very deep idea. I believe that it's one of the primary focal points in the Bible, and I believe there's good reason for that. I believe that it is one of the main hooks that we get in to get dragged into hell. It's one of the main hooks, is anger, resentment, offense, because it's based in smallness. Now, when it's the closest person in your whole life, a lot of these little woo-woo reframes, a little hard to swallow. You're like, well, yeah, I mean, I got to be a big person, right? It's just like, the shock. But it's just one of these things where, you've just got to forgive. That's it. There's no other way. And then you've got to recenter on why you're here and don't make it about you. Because as long as you're making it about you, then that wound will always be there. There's certain wounds that are so nasty, they're never really going to fully heal. Do you guys understand that? There's some things that are so ugly and nasty, you're never going to fully heal. You'll never be the same person after that. So all that you can do once that's happened is to grow beyond that person that you were. Because that version of yourself will always be damaged. It'll be permanently damaged, in my opinion. I don't think you heal from certain things. I think there's certain things that are so gruesome and so disgusting, you'll never heal from it. And so all that you can do is, yes, you can release trauma and you can work on it, but I think that you continue to grow to where your influence and your bigness, and by bigness, it really means smallness, right? In the smallness of the ego, you let in that divine energy and then you become bigger. And so it's one of those things where as you expand and your circle of influence expands and you grow, what winds up happening is that problem becomes very small. Similar to like a kid, if someone stole your He-Man or G.I. Joe, and you're like, what a little prick, right? And then you're older and you don't care. But see, as adults, we don't tend to grow at that same rate as we do from when we're kids. But I think that when you truly do grow, like when I've seen just horrifying things, what winds up happening is you grow to the point that you actually just feel sympathy for them and you're not mad at all. That's how you beat the wound through trauma healing and conscious forgiveness. But ultimately, when something that disgusting has happened, you have to go beyond that, and you have to just grow. You just keep growing. You keep adding value to other people, make it less about yourself. And so in a weird way, those traumas that you endure actually can make it less about yourself. And ironically, in making it less about yourself, you grow. Ironically, in making it less about yourself, you add more value. So that's sort of like a powerful, as we say, psychedelic component of the sober life existence, where, rather than say having a bad trip and having to release through that bad trip, this would be the sober version. And so reality will provide a very similar type of experience as like a bad ayahuasca trip or something like that. It'll provide that, and it'll be consciously understanding what it is that you're experiencing that allows that growth. And you have to embrace that growth, and you have to embrace that as part of your life's path and journey. That kind of heavy, guys? Does everybody here relate a little bit to what it is that I'm saying? Yeah? Does that provide a bit of healing for you guys? Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, guys. I'm going to let go. I'm going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap up our evening together. Thank you guys very, very, very much for being here. I love you guys. I'll see you guys back at a future event.